this topic, we'll talk about smoke tests. Now, smoke tests are a concept that I've seen throughout my career implement database upgrades, but we never called them smoke tests. They were just checks that we learned to make organically. And in the past, they were checks that we kind of made ad hoc and inconsistently. But in a DevOps world, we want to try to make sure that we do this the same way every time. Smoke tests are a series of tests that are designed to ensure that anything that we think is important in our application is actually working. Right? Once we think we've completed our deployment, or once we've changed the system, we want to make sure that everything we expect to still be there is there. For example, plenty of database deployments, somebody will often open a simple connection to the database server at the end of the deployment and ensure that they can actually connect. And they may just get the software version or get the rows from a table. It's just a test to ensure the database is actually functioning. Now, a better smoke test might be ensure that the table in a database that contains our customers or our states or something else actually has data. But we can design whichever ones we want. In the DevOps world, this is similar to validation, but really it's a way of ensuring that critical things are still working. Smoke tests are a way of failing fast and detecting issues before our customers do. We want to let our operations staff catch and respond to and hopefully mitigate any issue as quickly as possible. The reason we're called smoke tests is it's similar to firefighting. If in the world we waited until we saw flames to call the fire department, we'd lose lots of buildings and lots of lives. Instead, when we see smoke, or more importantly, when our systems detect smoke, that's usually enough to raise an alarm. Right away, we want a response as quickly as possible. Even if it's a false alarm, it's better to respond early. In database development, we often want to have a few simple smoke tests that run after our deployment. We're not checking everything. We're not really validating that what we deployed is correct, but we're trying to ensure the critical items in our system are running just as we expect them to run. We also want to make sure that we structure our smoke tests because we want to run simple, quick tests first and then more comprehensive ones after that because we want to fail as quickly as possible on the simplest things like the database isn't started. We don't want to check that some procedure sends an email for an order if the database isn't actually running. We want to do that later. It's a slow process. Database is down, then we know nothing's going to work, so we certainly don't expect email to occur. We certainly don't want to wait for the application to start up as well. We want our smoke tests to be very quick and very small. These will tend to be custom-written tests for each environment, each application, but there's a few common tests that you may want to do. For example, the first thing you may want to check is database connectivity. Can I actually just connect and open up a connection? Maybe then we want to check, can I open an encryption key? That's usually a very quick process. We want to make sure those encryption keys exist. Maybe I want to check if a specific login or user exists so I can either log in with that account, or maybe I actually then do some query to the metadata in the system to determine if it exists. Perhaps a more slightly longer test is a messaging queue reachable? Or is the data in my transactional table within some window, right? Is the last order within a certain date, within the last day? I may want to do row counts of a series of tables to be sure they're above some value to ensure that in my data manipulation I haven't lost data. I also may want to check, has a certain number of objects been updated in the system? Maybe I want to check in the metadata if at least one object is modified or at least 5 or something else. More complex tests might say, is the number of modified objects equal to what we think we deployed? I may use specific tests to determine if some data transformers worked, right? If I've split a column or changed the name, has it actually occurred? And then maybe as a more extensive test, I want to execute some procedure, module, function, and see if I get back the results I actually expect. Now in your release management process, you may have generic smoke tests that always run, such as database connectivity, or maybe you set up specific ones for a specific deployment that do something that verifies a particular change has actually worked. These are similar to your unit tests or functional tests. You want them to run from your release system, but you want to be careful. We certainly don't want to disrupt the system. Some of our database testing frameworks don't really work well in production because they may manipulate the system in strange ways. So we typically want to make sure these are custom ones that won't have any impact on the system. We want them automated because it's entirely easy for anyone to forget to run these tests, especially after a stressful deployment.